Hey guys, Professor Bill of Comic Book University, and today we're going to be talking about how to get into comic books, alright? How to start reading a new series. This was a question that was asked by one of the subs who was commented, hey man, I'm really interested in Daredevil, love the character, but it's like issue number 600, how do I get into that? We're actually at like 605 now, not the point, but the idea is, yes, it can be very hard to get into a character. Specifically one whose numbers are so high. Now, granted, Marvel would oftentimes put and DC does it too, but Marvel will often bring a high-ranking number, like Daredevil 600, down to Daredevil number 1. The trick is, there are certain volumes when you do that, all right? When you're at number 605, as we currently are, the idea is that like what, right here. It's funny, I just got finished reading this. This is, issue number 606, even better, right? This just came out this week that I'm recording this video. So that would have been 2 days ago. And man, check this out. When you've got a number up that high, the cool thing is, it's still volume 1. But when you flip back to like an issue number 1, now which volume is it? Because if you already had an issue 1 for volume 1, then your new issue 1 is going to be a volume 2, or a volume 3, or a volume 4. How many issue 1s have you had? You know what I'm saying? And Marvel, DC, everybody does a horrible job at labeling that, There are people who are going to say this or that or the other thing. Look, if you've been in comics as long as me, when there was no such thing as renumbering, it's not a big deal. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, today when people renumber after like an issue 4, it says something. It is hard. It is daunting to jump on. When you have a number like 600 or 606, like there's another 605 issues I have to read to get the point. Well, no, a new storyline just started with 606. Yeah, but where do I start? It's hard. It is hard. There's no doubt about it. So I'm actually going to I'm just remembering, I just read this comic book yesterday. So I remember that there is something very cool about this comic book that will help. A lot of comics will help in this regard. They will typically give on this page, the title page, all right? They'll give you a brief history of Daredevil. Okay, so if you've never read Daredevil before, then this comic is a perfect example of the way that it's done right. So up top, brief little history. Who is Daredevil? This is what he is. This is who he is. This is what he can do. This is how he got his powers. Really quick blurb. You can also check Comic Book University. Daredevil explained in a minute. I'm just saying. And then after that, you get a little bit of the brief storyline that's been happening. Some of the major stuff that's happened in the past, in the run that this current writer, in this case it's Charles Soule, has been doing. And then the very, very recent stuff, so that you're right up to date. Now, you haven't actually read it. You don't know the intricate details of the story of the comic book, but you do have a gist, a general sense of what's going on. Also, I just closed the book. I shouldn't have. One of the other really cool things about it is that way at the bottom, I know nobody reads the fine print anymore, right? But Charles Soule is a lawyer, and he will tell you should always read the fine print. But right down here, they give you certain details about the comic book, okay? So here it'll say, Daredevil, number 606, October 2008. So if you get a whole bunch of these, that will give you a really good understanding of where this book starts and ends in the history of Daredevil. They're not going to necessarily say, oh, this is volume number 3. There are other websites that will do that for you, all right? The Marvel database, which is the Marvel, it's a Wikia page, not a wiki page, not a Wikipedia page. It's a Wikia page, the Marvel fan base. I have done a lot of work on those pages, and one of the things I've done is try to help sort through, but there's so many other guys on there, so many other people who have done even better job than I have. But we've all tried to make it easier for readers to look through and sort through, hey man, this is volume 1, this is volume 2, this is volume 6. So you have an idea of which ones came first. So you can always do a straight chronological order of when the comic books have actually come out, canonically, all right? When you have this is a prequel story, or this is a story from the past, or something like that, There's only but so much we can do about that. But we try. Look at the notes at the bottom of those pages. You can also look at some sites that I haven't worked on, like the Complete Marvel Reading Order. Marvel has always been easier to do this with because DC comics are hugely convoluted, all right? Every 5 years or so, it seems, there's a new crisis, all right, that winds up screwing up the entire continuity. Now, the Heroes in Crisis is supposed to be something different that I don't think is going to mess up continuity, but what the hell do I know? But like Rebirth was a complete reboot. The New 52 before that, a complete reboot. Several of the other crises caused complete reboots, like Identity Crisis was a huge one. What do you call it? Crisis on Infinite Earths was a pretty big one. And then there's the New Earth, Earth Prime, and DC Comics will mess you up. You can look at several comic book characters in the DC universe and understand how many Flashes are there? Why are there so many Flashes? Look at all the Green Lanterns that they have. Oh, a lot of it's because they're all over the place, but what's the origin story for each of those Green Lanterns? Well, it depends on which universe you're really looking at. DC is a whole lot more convoluted. It can still be sorted through by longtime fans. So the trick is, a great hub is to go to a local comic book store. Find someone. Maybe that person doesn't work there. Maybe that person's just looking through comics. Just go and be like, hey, man, do you have any customers who are really into this character who could talk me through, the history of such and such character? Or, again, we're on the internet, so find a comic book channel that specializes in so-and-so characters. One of the cool things about the DC universe, I don't know about on the Marvel universe, but their wiki is not just for, and I've done a very scant amount of work on the DC Wikia pages because they are really hard. Again, that's a really hard one. I know it in my head, but as far as like the actual, when exactly did this happen or that happen, that's a much harder one to get into, so I don't mess with those. But they do have individual wiki pages also. So there's not just the DC Universe wiki page, which will go into the New 52 universe and then all the other universes. More specifically, there'll be like there's a Green Lantern Wikia page. There's an Aquaman Wikia page. So all of the different histories and origins, was his father human? Was his father an ancient Atlantean mage? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is the real history of Aquaman? There are many different histories of Aquaman, but if you want to sort through them all and see all the different ones, bang, there you go. Wikipedia is also a good one. One of the cool things about comic book characters is that they're done with love. It's one of the reasons why many superhero movies don't really work. Hey man, you got a guaranteed audience to go and check it out, but if somebody decides to crap on your movie, it's because those same fans who they were guaranteed in your pocket on opening day, you turned them against you by doing a lousy movie. So they weren't with you from day 2 on, and that's why there were no repeat showings and people turning other people off of the movie saying, this isn't a good movie, you shouldn't go see it. So there's the good and bad in that regard. But we do have a lot of, we don't necessarily need all the rabid fans, but we do need even the fanboys. You know what I'm saying? We need all of the fans who are really into these characters who can explain these histories to you. A lot of us are on YouTube. A lot of us are on other social media platforms. A lot of them you'll find in comic collector groups on Facebook. You know what I'm saying? Or check out Twitter and say, hey, I have a question about hashtag Green Lantern, hashtag Hal Jordan. What's his actual origin? What's the origin of his ring? You know what I'm saying? Is that magic? There's all sorts of different ways to figure that out. You're going to get a bunch of people who are going to jump on. Ignore the trash, because there is social media. It is social media. You're going to get the trolls. You know what I'm saying? And people, there's going to be a lot of infighting. Hey, fanboy, you answered this question wrong. It's actually, let those go. All right? Just, people on the internet. Sometimes you can't see their faces, like you can see mine, and they're just trolls. What are you going to do? But for the most part, you're going to find the people who will be willing to help you out, who are willing to go out of their way and type or talk or spend their time in some way, shape, or form or another to explain those characters to you, to explain what are the best storylines to get into. So the example of Daredevil, where do I start? It's up to you. What's a good storyline that you're interested in? What's a good writer who was really good at what he or she did? You know what I'm saying? Nascenti, Miller. You know what I'm saying? Who are you actually into? Wade, for crying out loud. You know what I'm saying? Which artist did you really like? Me, myself, I fell in love with Gene Colan more than anything else because of his work on Daredevil way back in the early days of Daredevil blew me away. His range of motion with the character, you know, which storylines, which story arcs were particularly good, you know. Was it when all of a sudden he started fighting a bunch of Spider-Man's villains, when it was like, oh, he is so completely outmatched, it's insane? Which storyline are you really interested in? Go to your local comic book store, check out the trade paperbacks. You'll find a nice section on Daredevil or whatever character you're looking at. Pull it out, look at the back, literally judge a book by its back cover. You don't judge a book by its cover. You judge a book by the back cover. So you can just start going through and check it out. Flip through the book. See what's up. You know what I'm saying? If you like the book, absolutely grab it. You know what I'm saying? And then you can look up, hey, Daredevil stories like such and such such. Or do an internet search. You know what I'm saying? Google's a great teacher, kind of. We just, you know, what are the best Daredevil stories? You know what I'm saying? If you're brave and you want to go on Reddit, where you're going to have a whole lot of trolls, deal with it. Go on there and just be like, hey man, what's a good Daredevil story? I'm sure there's a Daredevil subreddit. You know what I'm saying? I'm positive there's got to be. Or again, whatever character you're looking for. One of the things that I noticed is that the person who asked me about Daredevil very specifically asked me this on a Quicksilver page. It was Quicksilver issue number 4. Quicksilver No Surrender issue number 4. Now, since it was, you know, issue 1 through 5, issue 5 hasn't come out yet, but it's a simple 5-issue story arc. It's a separate comic book in and of itself, and it starts with an issue 1. Issue 1, it's funny, that issue 1 was not too intimidating. It's like, oh, I can learn about Quicksilver by jumping on this comic book. Actually, you can't. You can't. You're not going to know. If you never knew who Quicksilver was and you grab this issue number 1, this is an issue 1 that's not meant for brand new, you know, fans, brand new people who are looking to jump on a comic book. It used to be a day back in the day. And it's funny, I've talked to Ty Templeton about this. And because I said, listen, Marvel used to have a policy, especially Jim Byrne. Jim Byrne used to always say, he's worked for Marvel, DC, a whole bunch of companies. Jim Byrne used to always say, hey man, you got to write each comic book as though it's an origin story in some way, shape, or form, some small way, because every comic book that you make is somebody's first comic book. Back in the day, it was easy to jump on. You can jump on any old Wolverine comic book, and you could, you know, read that and just be like, oh, okay, cool. I understand a lot about this character, and then move on. Much akin to the way that Daredevil book is opened. The funny thing is, I asked Ty Templeton about that, and he says, yeah, you know, I actually went and asked Jim Shooter, but, you know, after our conversation, I went and I asked Jim Shooter about that, and Jim Shooter said that he said it. And I said, oh, did you? And Jim Shooter, former editor at, very synonymous editor at Marvel, he said, well, I hired Jim, so there you go. That's a great way of looking at it, and I love the way that comic book artists and writers and editors can work with each other in that regard. That's beautiful. That's perfect. I love that. God bless them. And thank you for Ty Templeton, again, for sharing that story with me, and now me for sharing it to you guys. So, and that's all that comic books are. They're just stories. You know what I'm saying? They shouldn't be that hard to get into. But by jumping onto Quicksilver, thinking that, oh, I don't know, you know, maybe this user, this commenter is saying, oh, I don't know anything about Quicksilver, but I'm interested in the character, his aesthetics. It looks pretty cool. Let me check it out. Well, that Quicksilver story stems from the No Surrender storyline, which was a 16-issue story arc by 3 writers, specifically Mark Waid, Jim Zub, and Al Ewing. And these 3 wrote this incredible storyline, 16 issues long, for the Avengers, and then boom, and immediately after it was renumbered back down to number 1 again. Yeah, thanks, Marvel. But the idea is that you can't just jump onto that issue 1 of, what do you call it, Quicksilver, thinking that you got the story from the start. No. How did Quicksilver get in that area? So you got to read the little blurbs that come beforehand. You're never going to be able to jump on issue number 1 unless you go digital. You know what I'm saying? Go to like the Marvel universe. There's actually 2 Marvel apps that allow you to read comic books. The DC app is really good. It's going to get even better because my understanding is that if you subscribe to the DC streaming service, you automatically get subscribed to the comic book app also. So you get to watch Warner Brothers movies and at the same time, which includes the DC animated universe and a whole bunch of other DC movies, DC-based movies, and then you also get to read their comic books for free. Oh, mind blown. Marvel, jump on it. So what a fantastic idea that is. Am I wrong or am I right? I'm right. In that regard, you got to jump on those old comic books. And if you want to start from issue number 1 of Daredevil, his origin all the way through, by all means. But understand that there are going to be later comic books where you're going to find new origins. Daredevil Yellow that's a trade paperback. You're going to find all new origin there. You know what I'm saying? Mark Millar, when he jumps on Daredevil, he doesn't actually change the numbering for Daredevil. That was before they started changing the numbering of comics. You got a whole new origin story there, and they're introducing new characters to his origin that were technically always there, but no, they weren't. New stories in relation to his father and everything, so you're always going to find something different. So where to jump on a story? My recommendation is you go to the comic book store, and or even better, you can just listen to us, me, and a whole bunch of other people who are online, especially me, and find out when this person says, I almost always say it. I believe I consistently say it. Okay, so we're starting a new story arc here. So bang, bang, bang. Even if it says issue number 601, like that Daredevil comic book, it's a new story arc. So it's a jumping on point. Even if it's just a minor jumping on point, it's something. It's a handhold. It's something to grasp onto, And then you start reading from there. Yes, of course, there's going to be plenty of things that they're going to reference and you're going to be like, wait, what? And one of the big complaints I have with comic books is that they don't do those narrator's notes or editor's notes, more specifically, as much as they used to. They've been doing a bit better lately, all right? I think there have been enough of us talking. I don't think I'm the only one saying it. But one of the things I used to love about Marvel, even better than DC, when I was growing up, is that they used to always do the editor's note and say, oh, this, thing that Daredevil referenced was actually back in, 20 issues ago, and Daredevil number, 584. So you can just, oh, okay, so either you go back and you look at that comic book, or you just know, okay, this such and such happened. Are you interested in going back and look at that? By all means, go back and look at it. If not, move on. You know what I'm saying? Just move on. Know that he's referencing something that happened in the past, and he gave you exactly what you needed to know. Those of us on the inside know more than that. But if not, it's up to your level of curiosity. Maybe you do want to go back and find that trade paperback that has that issue in it, read that whole story arc, and be like, I get it. Because at the end of the day, no matter where you start, even if you start at an issue number 6, I still do it to this day. I still do it. I haven't read anything from Deathstroke Rebirth. All right, I've read nothing from Deathstroke Rebirth until all of a sudden I saw Deathstroke versus Batman. I think that was starting with issue number 30. All right, that's by Christopher Priest. So I'm like, oh, Deathstroke versus Batman. This looks like a great story arc, and I love that writer, Christopher Priest. So why don't I jump on this? Well, I decided to start at issue number 29 just to have a good idea of what is leading into all of this. Maybe there'll be something that leads into it. There was not really. There was on the last page. It was kind of, indicated that, oh, now he's in Arkham Asylum. Oh, that puts him in Batman's neighborhood. But for the most part, that didn't really help. But it could have. It could have, I can always go back and read all of the Deathstroke comic books. I've been recommended to do that. Maybe I will. But I've also been recommended to go back and read all the Green Arrow books and all of the... just recently, I jumped on... just this week, I jumped on Red Hood and the Outlaws. You know what I'm saying? Just a month ago, I jumped on Green Arrow. So at any moment, you could jump on a new comic book, and the idea is, don't worry about it. There's always going to be trepidation for all things in life. Do you remember the first time you started driving when you were, I don't know how old it is, but in New Jersey, where I grew up, it was 17. But I was living in Florida for a while when I was 15 years old. I was 14 years old. I was a freshman in high school, and I started in Florida, and 16 was the legal age to start driving there. Then I actually moved to New Mexico. That was a rough trip there, and I the starting age was 15 to get your driver's license there. So I'm like, dude, I'm going to be 15 by next year. That's awesome. That means I can get a learner's permit and I can start driving now. And I've already been driving with my uncle anyway since I was like 12. You know what I'm saying? He'd put me behind the wheel and be like, just driving a straight line down the street. It's a private street, so, you know. But, like, that's the idea, you know. Like, it depends on where you are, what you're doing. But either way, the trick is just start. There's always got to be a starting point. Just jump on it, you know what I'm saying? And no matter what, whatever you're starting at, the reference I was trying to make with driving is when you actually went for your driver's test, or more, the test to actually get your driver's license, you're nervous. And you're thinking to yourself while you're learning how to drive, I'm never going to be able to do this. The trick is to remember all the other times that you started doing something in life and you thought that exact same thing. I'm never going to be able to do it. But people do it. Lots of people do it. It seems like everybody drives. Some people drive better than others, but the idea is that everybody drives. And we don't have constant accidents every time. On average, your average person is not driving down the street and seeing 14 different, 10-car pileups every time he's driving down the road. That usually just doesn't happen. Therefore, vis-a-vis, ergo, I'm trying to remember all the things that was said in The Matrix Part 2. Therefore, everybody can learn how to do that. Everybody can jump onto a comic book. And yes, you're going to be confused. Whatever comic book you're jumping at, even if it says #1, unless that's the introduction to a character, you're going to be confused when you jump on this comic book. You're going to be. That's just the nature of the game. Don't let it bug you. Don't let it scare you. Jump on. You're going to just go, I have no idea what's going on. And then you read issue number, you read your second issue, all right? So right now you start on issue number 606. But, you're going to read 607. You'll be like, okay, at least I understand what's going on because of the last issue. And then, okay, at least I understand because of what happened from the previous 2 issues. Then you finish that story arc, 6-issue story arc. Then you go on to the next story arc, and you're reading that. Well, I get it because I know where Daredevil was just at. Maybe you might get the inclination to go back and read some other story arcs at some point. But the idea is, at one point or another, you're going to be an expert. And one day somebody's going to, it could be the next week, it could be the next year. Somebody's going to say something about Daredevil, and you're going to turn around and say, actually, in a couple of story arcs ago, I think it was issue number 606, such and such and such happened. They'll be like, oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, you must be a huge Daredevil fan. Meanwhile, you've only been reading him for how long? But you get to say, yeah. Because we're all going to be experts in something at some point or another. And you don't have to be a professor in order to be an expert on something. You could literally just read it and keep on reading it until it gets to the point where you're so familiar with it, so comfortable with it, it doesn't matter. So there's lots of there's no one way to jump on to a comic book. For some people, the best way is, like, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, the late 70s and the 80s. You know what I'm saying? For me, I learned how to swim by my father literally throwing me into the Atlantic Ocean off of the Jersey shoreline and just saying, you're going to sink or you're going to swim and you're going to thank me later. And he threw me in and, yep, I gulped a little bit of water. And, yep, it was scary as hell. And, yeah, I found out there were sharks in that water at some point. But the point is, I didn't sink in. And I'm pretty sure he would have saved me. You know what I'm saying? But the idea is that that's how I learned how to swim. It was a life or death situation. I jumped right in, but that's not for everybody. That's not for everybody. So there's multiple ways to start new comic book characters, new comic book books. You know what I'm saying? And the team books can be especially difficult. Please understand that. The team books, like, if you've never read Suicide Squad before, but, oh, I like Harley Quinn, so I'm going to jump on that. You know what I'm saying? Or I used to read a bunch of, Batman books that had Killer Croc in it. Oh, wow, what's going on? Killer Croc is a part of this team? I might like this. If you have some kind of a grounding point to jump in, that will help out a lot with team books, okay? Whether it's the Avengers, the Justice League, the Teen Titans, the Titans themselves, whatever book you're going to be considering jumping onto, it helps if you have at least one character that could be your tether, your focus. So you're mostly reading the story for that character. And all of a sudden the other characters start to grow on you. Maybe you want to read one of their comic books if they have, a comic book out also. If they have a solo story arc, a limited series that's going to start someplace. There's lots of reasons, lots of ways to jump onto comic books. The trick is just don't be afraid and do whatever works for you. Wow, really long video, right? Just to talk about but that's the way it's done. The trick is there is no wrong way, unless it's the way that you were kind of forced into. It was against your better judgment. Find your own way to jump into the comic book, however you want to do it, whatever's good for you. The trick is to just start reading at some point or another. That's all it is. And suddenly, you're an expert. I promise you. Guys, that's going to be it for me. Keep on reading, eh? Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.